My name is Eamon and I'm a Professor of Developmental Neuroscience and Psychopathology at UCL. So our work at UCL has really aimed to understand the link between early adversity and maltreatment and later mental health problems, and in particular using biological studies in neuroscience in particular to understand how early adversity gets under the skin in ways that increase the risk of later mental health problems in children and young people, and in particular experiences of maltreatment, child abuse and neglect. So we have been trying to look at different neurocognitive systems, so things like threat processing and memory processing, to understand how they may change or adapt in ways that can be helpful for the child in the short term, so growing up in a chaotic or neglectful home environment, but which can incur long-term risk or vulnerability when they move to a more normative home placement or school, and make it less able for them to deal with those environments in an effective way. So we have found, for example, in relation to threat processing, that children become hypervigilant to threat, and that's associated with increased amygdala reactivity, and that this pattern might make it more likely for kids to engage in more conflictual relationships with peers, with foster parents, in ways that will make it harder for them to cultivate and sustain relationships. And with autobiographical memory, we have recently found that children tend to present with an overgeneral pattern of memory relative to their peers. So maltreatment seems to lead to an avoidance of traumatic or early difficult material in a way that leads to a generalization of how they think about their past self. So memories are very overgeneral, and that means that they are less able to draw on the detail of the past to negotiate future experiences. So a recent imaging study, for example, that we have done has shown that they tend to privilege negative memories in the past, and that they tend to show less specification of positive memories. And that's important because you see the same pattern in depression and in adults who present with depression. And one can imagine how for these children, the privileging of negative memories can make it more likely that they will develop a more negative sense of self, and also more likely to have a negative mood. So these are two ways that we're looking at how children can adapt in ways that you can understand being helpful in their home environment, but which may incur risk for later mental health difficulty. I think it matters because we need to really have a fundamental shift in how we think about the mental health needs of these kids. They are really poorly served by traditional CAM services. Their presentations are complex, there are attachment, placement issues, and that the mental health problems when they emerge are often comorbid. And instead of simply trying to offer help when a mental health problem emerges at a clinical level, we need to shift the lens back and think about how we can intervene in ways to prevent the emergence of mental health problems in the first place. So our work is really trying to understand what we call latent vulnerability, the vulnerability that children present with after maltreatment, in a way that could allow us to develop effective screening tools to identify kids who are more vulnerable, and then try to understand mechanisms where we could target interventions in a preventative way that would make it less likely we develop a mental health problem in the future. So really, I think for me the bottom line is about moving towards a much more preventative model and understanding the particular mental health needs of these children, which are different from the mental health needs of other children. So although our work is very much focused on neuroscience, it's likely that any effective intervention is going to be profoundly relational, and that has been likely the core difficulty the child has experienced in their families. But establishing a relationship based on trust is likely to be crucial in helping the child learn new things about the world and to recalibrate some of these neurocognitive systems that I mentioned. So the relational aspect is going to be central, but what the precise nature of any intervention will look like remains to be explored, because most of our kind of interventions and programs have been developed to treat presenting problems. And here we're talking about helping kids who don't have any problems but are at risk of future problems. So that's going to take a real shift away from a kind of a medical categorical way of thinking about things. And I think over the next 10, 15 years, we need to invest in thinking what would a preventative model of help look like that could boost resilience, that could engage children, that could feel like a positive and helpful experience, that would make it less likely for them to develop a mental health problem in the future.